Hello, what we're going to do today is look at assessing normality. So keep in mind what we're really doing when we do this. We're taking a look at a sample, and from that sample we're trying to determine if it's reasonable to think that the population from which we got that sample was actually normal itself. So it's not a perfect science, but what we're going to do is look at histograms and look at normal QQ plots, or quantile plots, to try and help us make that determination. So this is section 6.7, and what we're going to do is take a look at problems 5 and 6 on page 328 and 329. We're just going to use those data sets, and we're going to do the two graphs for each and then talk about whether we think that they're normal or not. So the first one, and notice, maybe people haven't noticed this, but on the left-hand side of the StatCrunch window are all the data sets, or links to all the data sets that are referred to in the book, or almost all of them. So this particular one is goes along with number 5, and this is Old Faithful data. And so this is a list of a bunch of durations, so how long the geyser was erupting. So if you go down, there's several of them, more than you would want to type in. There's about 40 of them, it looks like, 40 durations. So what we're going to do is go ahead and make a histogram of the durations, and then go ahead and make a QQ plot for the durations. And anytime I ask you to assess normality or something like that on a test or in the book or my stat lab problems, this is what we're asking for. So we go to graphics, histogram, and duration is the variable that we're interested in, or the book was interested in. So then we go to create graph. And this is what we end up with. I think we would probably describe this as being left skewed. It looks as though we've got a long left tail, and it also looks like we've got some possible outliers there. There were a few, I don't know if it's maybe 2 durations that were a lot shorter than the rest. So those might be considered possible outliers depending on which criteria you might want to use there. So let's go ahead and do a QQ plot of duration. And this is what the QQ plot looks like. Remember, for us to believe that it's perhaps reasonable that something's normal or came from a normal distribution, we should see a bell shape in the histogram, or at least a rough bell shape, and we should see a linear relationship in terms of the QQ plot. We definitely see some curvature here, and it looks as though these observations out here are probably outliers. It looks like these are those 2 that were way to the left, and then we also have maybe a couple others that that's kind of that left tail that we were seeing in the histogram. So putting all this together, putting these 2 things together, I would probably conclude that the data is not normal, or didn't come from a normal population, because of the outliers and because of the fact that this is not linear. If you see any sort of curvature or some sort of consistent non-linear pattern, that indicates that it did not come from a normal population. So let's take a look at another data set. This is the one mentioned in number 6 on the following page. We're using data set 1, health exam results for females. And so we've got all sorts of cholesterol and pulse and waist and weight and height and all sorts of things. Problem 6 asks us to look at heights. So what we're going to do is try to determine if heights are normal, or if it's reasonable to think that they're normal. So we'll do a histogram of height. Make sure you select the correct variable. Create it, and it looks like this. In practice, you're never going to get a perfect bell shape, but I would say this looks not too bad. Not too bad. Maybe a little bit of a heavier tail here than we'd like, but again, those could be due to the cutoffs that StatCrunch chose. If we go ahead and look at a QQ plot is probably actually a better way to assess normality. It's specifically designed just for that reason. So if we create a graph of height, this is what we end up with. And recall, in a QQ plot, linearity indicates normality. It doesn't prove normality, but it gives us a good indication that this sample may have come from a normal population. And I would say that this, we see there's no consistent pattern. They're all clustered fairly close to the line. So I would say it's fairly reasonable to say that this sample came from a normal population. And so what you're going to have to do, on tests and quiz problems, etc., is refer to StatCrunch and either enter the data by hand or perhaps use, on the left side there, use some of the built-in data sets, depending on what the problem asks you to do. Just keep in mind that the folks who are in the Casper area and are taking their exams in the Casper College Testing Center, you have to use StatCrunch. DDXL is not available due to some technical concerns. So StatCrunch is what you folks are going to have to use. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.